Hey, well, welcome back to part two of our webinar series, where we are creating awareness and pathways into a union career with Shambaugh&Sons, a national design and build signatory contractor. So we're everywhere. We're all across the country. In the previous webinar, we talked about part one, a little history and background about Shambaugh&Sons and also Local 669, the Sprinkler Fitter Union. So in this part two, in this webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about where unions came from, where our trade came from. I think that's really important to understand where did sprinkler fitters come from. And then we're going to get into some basic apprenticeship 101. So I want to start with a joke, though, just to break things up. You ever hear the story of the plumber and the doctor? So a doctor had a plumbing issue. It was a Saturday night. Doctor calls a plumber. The plumber comes to the house, goes upstairs, fixes the problem, comes downstairs, hands the doctor the invoice or the bill. The doctor looks at it, looks at the plumber and says, "You got to be kidding me. I've never made this much money before in my life as a doctor." The plumber looks at the doctor and says, "I didn't either when I was a doctor." So the point out of this is you don't fail into construction. You don't fail into construction. So let's go back. Let's talk about our background. Where do we come from? And we're going to do that by reviewing a little bit of U.S. history. So we're going to talk about the fire that changed America, which is the Garment Triangle Shirtwaist Fire that happened in 1911. So let's watch a quick video.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a man-made disaster, a tragedy of the industrial age, made all the worse because it could have been prevented. Let me set the scene. New York City, early 20th century. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory occupied several floors of a Manhattan business building called the Ash Building. It was located just off Washington Square Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was, by almost any definition, a sweatshop. It was a densely packed place. Some 500 people worked there, and the work schedule was punishing. 11 to 12 hours a day, every day. Most of the people employed at the factory were young immigrant women, teenagers even, who didn't speak English. These women sat at long tables, day in, day out, sewing shirtwaists. Shirtwaists were mass-produced blouses. They resembled men's shirts and were very popular with working women. So here's what happened. March 25th, 1911, Saturday evening, the end of the workday, the work week. A fire started in a bin of cotton scraps, perhaps from a cigarette butt. A manager tried to use a hose to put it out, but the hose valve was rusted shut, and the hose itself was rotted away. The factory floor didn't have a sprinkler system, so the fire spread quickly. People panicked. The building had only one flimsy fire escape, and it wasn't nearly big enough. It collapsed. The building had 4 elevators, but only one was working, and it only held 12 people at a time. It managed to make 4 rescue trips before it broke down. Some desperate workers jumped to their deaths down the elevator shaft. Workers tried to take the stairs, but the exit doors only opened inward, and they were kept locked by factory management. Many people were crushed to death trying to get out. Firefighting technology hadn't caught up to the new tall buildings of a city like New York. The fire hoses and ladders could only reach the 7th floor, 1 floor short of the fire. Dozens of desperate workers jumped out of the windows. They chose to die from the fall instead of the flames. Other workers burned to death or died from smoke inhalation. The whole episode lasted just 18 minutes. 144 people were dead. 2 more died later in the hospital, bringing the death toll to 146. Until the events of September 11th, it was the deadliest workplace disaster in New York City history. Days later, on April 5th, a massive funeral protest march took place on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. More than 350,000 people were in attendance.
So let's quickly review. The individuals that perished in that workplace tragedy were young immigrant women, some of them teenagers, right? 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. So if you want to really dive into, or have your classes dive into labor history, you can go on YouTube as an example and Google the labor movement during the Industrial Revolution, and you will see signage that will say, why pay a man $1 a day when you can pay a woman or a child 10 cents? So that's why they were working their cheap labor. So they were working at the end of the work week, not a Friday night, but a Saturday night in this sweatshop. They weren't at home, they were working, and there was a fire and they couldn't get out because the doors were locked from the outside. And why were they locked? To keep the young children in so they can continue to make shirtwaists for the company. The elevators, only 1 out of 3 worked, and it eventually collapsed. The fire escape collapsed. The fire was on the 8th floor and the hoses only reached the 7th floor. On the 9th floor was the executives and the office. They all got out, but not those individuals on the 8th floor. So it was a complete disaster. And the fire that changed America, it changed America because of people. After this tragedy, in protests, the growth of the labor movement, 350,000 people said enough was enough. So labor unions grew because of this tragedy. And they also grew because of what was happening in the mines. And this photo is from the same time period, maybe a little bit earlier, in the mines. One of the people that led this change was a woman by the name of Miss Frances Perkins. And Miss Frances Perkins became the Secretary of Labor in New York State for Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And in New York State, they led the way with workers' compensation. They led the way with child labor laws. When FDR became the president of the United States, Miss Frances Perkins became the first woman in the U.S. cabinet. She held the position of Secretary of Labor for 12 years. And there are things and laws and regulations that we take for granted today, and you take for granted in your school. And we can thank Miss Frances Perkins, but we can thank the leaders of the labor unions that impacted change. Child labor laws, minimum wage, fire codes, OSHA, the weekend. These are things that we take for granted today. Also, what passed as a result of the Garment Triangle Shirtwaist Fire was the Sullivan-Huey Fire Act that required sprinkler systems in manufacturing facilities. Right? So 146 people died in 18 minutes. Fire suppression systems are there before the first responders can get there. And unfortunately, when we don't have a building, a room, a manufacturing plant, a school, a dormitory that has fire suppression systems, right, there's no way to stop or curtail or contain that fire until the fire department gets there. Right, so that's a little bit about our background. We're very proud of that because, again, we save lives. These are life safety systems. So if you're looking at worthwhile work, not only do you have an opportunity to use your hands and use your brain, you're impacting the greater good.
The triangle shirt.
So in addition to protecting people and improving a work environment to ensure that people are being treated fairly, to ensure that a woman is paid the same as a man, that's called wage equity. And we have that in our labor union, and we have that in all unions. What the building trades unions have also done over the last 100 years is to train America. And we do that through what's called registered apprenticeship programs. So what is it? Right? A registered apprenticeship program is a combination of on-the-job training and technical instruction. Right? And I want you to think about misused words today. right? And I'm going to give you an example. You ever hear of the term multitasking? And multitasking is something that came out over 20 years ago, and every, great leader came out and says, you got to multitask, you got to multitask, you got to do things at the same time. And that's basically what it is. But the deal, though, the reality, the truth is that the brain can only focus on one thing at a time. The brain cannot multitask. And that's why texting and driving is illegal. You're either texting or you're driving. You can't do both. Right? So the brain has to actually stop what it's doing and restart. So psychologists today, they talk about multitasking is very dangerous and exhausting, right? For all of us, right? It's misused, right? Of course we can do multiple things at the same time, but let's not butcher it, right? Just to pound, more productivity out of someone, okay? Another misused term today is apprenticeship. Okay, just because you have a nice uniform or a neat set of tools or a company van doesn't make you a plumber, an HVAC tech, doesn't make you a sprinkler fitter. What does is training. Our training, just like all the other union building trades, is registered at the state level and also the federal level. And our apprenticeship is a collaboration between organized labor, the union, our contractors like Shambaugh&Sons, and we have training committees and we have associations. What's registered at the state level is our standards and our curriculum. Okay, so if you are in a high school, your students have a gold standard that they want to achieve. And that gold standard is in the spring of every year, there's a senior class that walks across the stage and they get a diploma. The diploma is the gold standard. In the unions, in a registered apprenticeship, the gold standard is becoming a journey level worker, right? So becoming a journeyman, right? That's a subject matter expert that can train apprentices and work unsupervised. Now, there are 43 different trades or crafts, and a trade or a craft is a specialty. Just like you think about, I want you to think about this, teachers, right? What kind of teachers are they? They're specialties. They could be a language teacher, they could be a phys ed teacher, they could be a physics teacher, they could be an English as a second language teacher, they could be a tech teacher. So those CTE educators, or they could be an agriculture teacher, that's a specialty. Right? So the trades have specialties, and there's 43 of them. Some are 2-year programs, some are 3-year programs, some are 4, some are 5. All the pipe trades, including sprinkler fitters, is a 5-year program. 5-year program. So it's 10,000 hours of on-the-job training and 1,200 hours of technical instruction. The job site's the classroom. So our technical training is broken into virtual training or online training through our learning management system, on average 8 hours a month requirement, and then also formalized classroom training that happens in one of our training locations. Now, if you want to get blown away, and this is why it's America's best kept secret, all the trades or crafts combined last year invested $2.5 billion in training and education, making us the largest education system in America. The largest education system in America, next to high school public school systems combined, right? We're bigger than any university system in America. What will also make you smile is we do this at no cost to the taxpayer. We're self-funded. We're privatized unions. Right? So there's a portion of union dues that go strictly to education. So an apprentice is going to pay $28 a month, right? Because that could be a question as well. How much is this going to be, right? So that's why numbers are really important, right? And that's why I shared we're 16,000 member local, part of an international that's 359,000 members. So the way it works is an apprenticeship. I want you to think about climbing a ladder. Our ladder has 10 rungs. Every 6 months, you're going to go from one level to the next, or one tier to the next, or one class to the next. And guess what happens to your pay? When you go from one to the next, you get a 5% pay increase until you journey out. There's 10, right? So you get to the 10th level, then the one after that, you'll become a journey person and recognized throughout the world as the industry leader, as a subject matter expert. In addition to that title, our members will earn 45 college credits, 45 college credits without incurring any debt, no debt. And they will be a couple classes short of a 2-year degree in construction technology. Right? America's best kept secret, the other 4-year degree. So let's go back to Hollywood a little bit here. One of my favorite movies is The Matrix. And this is from Matrix 1.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Which one did he take? He took the red pill, right? Because he wants the truth. Right? If you're like me, sometimes you learn the truth by unlearning what you thought was true or what you were told was true. Here's an example, and maybe you can mop what I'm spilling here. You ever hear this, or have your students ever heard this, or have they ever talked to you about this? Or if you're a student that's listening in and watching, anybody ever tell you that the only way to be successful is to get a white collar job and a 4-year degree? Got to go to college, got to go to college, got to go to college. That's the blue pill. That's not the only way to be successful. Okay, we offer a path to great success. And here's something else to consider. 67% of those that attend a 2-year and/or a 4-year college do not graduate. 67%. Right? You've got 45 million Americans that are currently carrying a significant student loan debt, and that debt is over $32,000. It's like $3 trillion as a country. And those that borrow, their average loan payment is over $30,000. 45 college credits, no debt. Earn while you learn. The other number that is just staggering is a higher ed term called summer melt. Summer melt captures and quantifies those individuals that say they're going to go to college but never step foot on the college campus. Maybe they didn't obtain sufficient financial aid. Maybe they missed administrative deadlines or lack support from family and friends to just fill out forms and get physicals and get booster shots and get typhoid and all these forms that have to be filled out. It becomes very overwhelming. So some school districts, 50% of those that say they're going to go to college never step foot on the college campus. And a large number of those individuals actually took out a student loan. And they never step foot on a college campus, and they're already in debt. And that information is from Harvard University. So we want our members to stay on the road to success, right? We want our students, we want our next generation, we want our children to stay on the road to success. And what we don't want is individuals that end up on a detour, on an exit, right? They end up down a dead-end path. And I call that dead-end path, one of the biggest ones is minimum wage careers or industries with no benefits. Did you know that the average age of minimum wage workers is 35? It's not a teenager, it's 35. Did you know that 50% of women and people of color are employed in low-wage industries. And look, we have room on this bus that's going to the pathway to success. And one reason that we have room on the bus is there's a lot of construction and growth going on. The semiconductor, the CHIPS bill. Okay, we're seeing this in New York State, for the efforts of Senator Schumer and President Biden, that we have the government that's focused on bringing manufacturing back to the United States. We have the infrastructure bill. So there's a lot of great things that are causing growth. Now, the other thing that is impacting our demand for people and the need and the opportunity is the fact that we have the silver tsunami coming, right? And that's the baby boomers, the generation that was born after World War II, is exiting the workforce or will be exiting the workforce. And that creates an opportunity for young women and men to fill these positions in great paying careers. So get on the bus. There's opportunity on the bus. So I want to close with what unions do, right? And if you've ever had an opportunity to go to California to see the redwoods, or if you've watched a film on the redwoods, you will be amazed, just like I was. It's the tallest living thing in the world, thousands of years old. These trees are 36 stories high, 36 stories high. Even more impressive, right? It was breathtaking for me when I just look up and I just get lost just looking at these beautiful living trees. And so I did more research and I found out that the root system of these 36-story buildings, trees, is actually not as tall as I am, right? It only goes down 5 feet. So how the hell do they stay up? How does a 36-story building stay up where the root system only goes down 5 feet? It's pretty simple. The roots go out and they intertwine with the tree next to them. So each tree is not standing on its own. It's being supported by the other trees. And that's why it's important that there's 16,000 members in Local 669. That's why it's important that there's 359,000 members of the United Association, or that there's over 3 million workers in the North American Building Trade Union, which is all the crafts or trades. We support each other. So I want to thank you for joining me in part 2 of our 4-part webinar. And I look forward to being with you again shortly in our part 3 portion of Shambaugh&Sons and Local 669. Thank you for joining us.